Welcome back, everyone. I hope everyone had a winning event because I did not, which makes three straight losing events for me, but that's okay. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to keep making videos, and I'm looking to bounce back here. I really do enjoy doing this, and I made a few bad decisions here, but I do think I could bounce back. And before we get into the recap for last event, I do want to give a shout out to all 7 of my subscribers. I really appreciate the support. And, honestly, I'm a little surprised you guys are even able to find my videos because, real talk, I can't even find my own. But, yeah, really. And so, with that, let's get right into the recap. So, for the last event, I did put 1.5 units on Zalal. Like I said, I was able to get in on it early when the line just opened up for him. And I thought minus 150 was a very fair price. But like I said, anything more than that, minus 160, 70, or even like 80 onwards, I wouldn't want to put him in any parlays or even play him straight at that point. I just felt like the short notice was definitely, it had an effect. And, Zalal, after he wasn't able to get the takedown on Choi, it looked like, he was a bit lost out there. And, I don't think it was a terrible play. I felt that, where the line was getting at, it was getting a little wide and there was no more value on it. But I did feel that Zalal maybe could have used his wrestling a bit more effectively. But, Choi showed really good takedown defense and was able to do enough on the feet to get the decision there. Moving on, I did also have half a unit on Edwards. I did pick Rosa to win, but I felt that if the fight did stay long enough, that Edwards could potentially get a decision here. And, Edwards was giving Rosa a bit of trouble on the feet, but at the end of the day, she just wasn't able to fight off any of the takedowns or work her way back up. So again, it was only a half a unit play. I wasn't super confident in it. I just felt that Edwards might have had a shot to keep it standing, which clearly she did not. And for the next one, it gets a little fucky here because I ended up parlaying Rodriguez with Volkov, which honestly was a terrible, terrible mistake. If you listened to my last podcast, you knew why I wasn't that high on Rodriguez, but I honestly wanted some juicier odds on Volkov. But Rodriguez, he choked big time. I thought he would be able to keep the fight standing, but he wasn't. Marquez, he just kind of walked into a single leg, and Rodriguez wasn't able to defend the takedown at all. And honestly, fuck Rodriguez, and fuck me for putting him in a parlay and making me look stupid. But what I ended up doing was I actually did end up putting like 4 units on Volkov after I cashed in on Dariush, but that wasn't tracked. I wasn't able to upload any more picks after the event had started. Not that it matters though, but officially I did lose a unit on the night. But speaking of Dariush, I did want to go over that real quick. I ended up putting 2 units on Dariush. I felt that he would have the advantage in pretty much all departments, with the grappling and the striking. And, it showed. I think he did. The striking actually seemed a little bit even. I'd say maybe Dariush had a very slight advantage. But he was able to get the job done, in the grappling, was able to grind out a win there. And, the main concern, again, was Dariush's durability. And I think he, it was really close, honestly. I was feeling a little nervous because he was eating a few shots from Dhiego. And, he was able to pull through, though. Even though that decision kind of scared me a little bit. It shouldn't have been a split. But, moving forward, my last pick, well, I didn't really, the other part of the parlay was Volkov, which I didn't cash on because Rodriguez lost, but I did end up, taking all the money I won from the Dariush event, or that fight, and put it on Volkov. I just felt that Volkov, he's in his prime, like I mentioned, and Overeem, while, he's still solid, he's just not as quick, not as durable, and, I had a feeling that Volkov was going to get it done. And I didn't end up putting the over 2.5 because, like I said last week, I was going to look into it a little more. And where it originally opened up at 1.5, it was a little, got me a little wary. I knew that, the line was set there for a reason, even if I didn't see it right away. And after reviewing the fight, I did see why the line was set the way it was because Volkov, he's been putting on a bit of weight, and I think that definitely contributed to some of the power that he has. But also another factor was just, the durability of Overeem. He's been knocked out, 15, 16 times, so not necessarily chinny, but definitely a little more prone to getting rocked and knocked out. And on top of that, I really didn't like the way, Overeem just kind of shells up in a lot of his fights. You can get away with it against lower level guys, but definitely not against someone like Volkov, who's going to pick his shots and find his way around that guard. Against guys like Sakai or even like Walt Harris, they're just going to blow their load and, gas themselves out punching through your guard. Not really going to work when it gets to high level fighters. And yeah, for that reason, I definitely didn't, want to touch the over on that fight. So with that being said, though, I did end up losing one unit on the night, ended up going 7 out of 12 in terms of straight picks. But with that being said, I'm looking to bounce back. So without further ado, let's get right into tonight. We have Andre Ewell, the plus 145 underdog, against Chris Gutierrez, the minus 170 favorite. And this is an interesting matchup. We have Ewell, who's been a split decision machine, going up against Chris Gutierrez, who really only knows how to throw leg kicks. And let's start with Ewell here. He's a very lanky sort of fighter. He's 5'8", but has a 75-inch reach. And, he uses it somewhat well. He's really good at, throwing the jab, throwing the 1-2, and has a really solid straight left. Also a, good front kick and knee up the middle. But the main concern with Ewell here is his gas tank and his tendency to, be a little wild sometimes, trading when he shouldn't be, especially, considering he has pretty significant reach advantage in most of his fights. He does get a little wild and does swing and brawl a little bit. He could use his range a little more effectively. But, another issue that he has is he does stand a little heavy on his lead leg. And that's going to be a little troublesome against someone like Gutierrez, who just loves to throw those leg kicks and body kicks. That aside, though, I do think that Ewell will have a pretty significant advantage in terms of striking. He's got a bit more pop in his punches. He's much quicker, very crisp striking. But yeah, again, his cardio is a little questionable, and it doesn't seem like he wears damage too well either. I mean, he's good when he's the one pressuring and when he's being aggressive. He's usually landing on his opponents. But when the table is turned and he's the one on his back foot, he gets a little wild and is honestly a bit hittable in those situations. His takedown defense is also improved quite a bit since his debut, but I don't think that'll matter too much in this fight, since I think this will largely be a stand-up fight. But taking a look at Chris Gutierrez, like I said before, this guy really just only throws leg kicks. I don't even know if he's capable of throwing punches, but he throws heavy leg kicks, heavy body kicks. Really, his whole game is centered around just throwing kicks, and he's got a wide variety of kicks, right? And I think that'll be he'll be a tough matchup for Ewell, because Ewell does, like I said before, stand heavy on that lead leg, and if Gutierrez is able to start chopping at that leg early, it'll pay off big time, especially outside of the first round when Ewell starts to tire a bit. Gutierrez is coming off of a draw against Durden, where he was backpacked that first round, got 10-8, which I don't agree with. You can't. I don't think it should be a 10-8 round when the guy's really just backpacking you that whole fight. But before that, he was able to finish Vince Morales with leg kicks, which is pretty impressive. But Vince Morales isn't that good. That being said, though, I think that just goes to show you just how effective and how powerful those kicks that Gutierrez has are. So with that being said, I do favor Gutierrez here. I think that those leg kicks are going to add up. Those body kicks are going to add up. And Ewell might get a little timid as the fight goes on, especially when he won't be able to put as much weight on that lead leg. And from a betting perspective, though, I don't know if I want to bet on Chris Gutierrez, because I don't know if you can really trust a guy who's only throwing leg kicks, who's only throwing kicks, body kicks, right? And unless he's knocking someone out via leg kicks, or he's seriously wobbling them, I don't know if it looks too good on the judge's decision or scorecard, especially since you don't know how the judges are going to score this. And at minus 170, I don't think it'll be I don't think it's a good price to pay for someone who's really just throwing leg kicks, right? So the pick here is Gutierrez. I think that the accumulation of damage via leg kicks and body kicks is going to get to Ewell, but if Ewell decides to pick it, put the pressure on him early and really start swinging at him, I think he has a shot there too. But as far as again a pick goes, I am going to go with Gutierrez, but not gonna bet on him. And in the next fight, we have Miranda Maverick, the -141 favorite, against Gillian Robertson, the +121 underdog. And this is a pretty interesting fight between two grapplers, I would say. Both of these chicks do their best work on the ground. Their striking is a little bit sloppy, but as far as their fighting style goes, both of these chicks do their best work when they got their opponent on the ground, whether they're going for the submission or the ground and pound. As far as the stand-up goes, I do favor Maverick here a bit more because I think that she's going to be the one that's a little more comfortable keeping the fight on the feet. I think she's going to be the one that is throwing the heavier punches. We saw in her fight against Joshua, she was just landing massive bombs on her in that first round, and was eventually able to get her out of there from due to a doctor stoppage. Joshua had a nasty cut on her nose from all the shots that she was eating from Maverick. I do actually think that Robertson is the more technical striker, but not by much. Although I just feel that she doesn't really put too much power in her shots, and more often than not, she's looking to shoot for the takedown, and just in general doesn't seem very comfortable on the feet. At least with Maverick, even though she is a little stiff on the feet and she is a bit hittable, she still likes to move forward and is happy to trade with opponents, whereas with Robertson, she's just going to throw a few shots and really just look for the takedown. So on the feet, I do give Maverick a slight advantage. As far as the grappling goes, though, I think Maverick will be the stronger fighter there. However, I think Robertson is definitely a bit more experienced. And from what I've seen, she's probably the better BJJ practitioner. I think if anyone's going to initiate the grappling, it'll likely be Robertson because that's just her fight style. She, again, isn't really comfortable on her feet. More than likely, she's going to eat a few shots from Maverick and likely shoot for the takedown. However, I'm not entirely sure that Robertson will be able to successfully take Maverick down and keep her there because Robertson really does like to go for submissions, and a lot of the times that leaves her open to getting swept and reversed. So I'm not sure, honestly, I'm not sure if Maverick is high enough level to get out of those positions because my biggest concern with Maverick, aside from her sloppy striking, is she's fought really low-level opponents, right? She's made most of her run in Invicta, and she's fought some pretty low-level fighters there. And in her debut, she fought against Joshua, who I feel like is really low-level too. Like, honestly, anyone that loses to Sarah Morris is pretty low-level in my opinion. However, going back to this fight, I do believe that if the fight goes to the ground, I do give Robertson the slight advantage there, but I'm not super confident in it because Robertson does seem to struggle against fighters like Maverick who are maybe a bit stronger, a bit more athletic, as we've seen before. Robertson did struggle against fighters like Santos and Barber, who honestly were a bit bigger than her, a bit stronger than her, and a bit more athletic than her. So Miranda Maverick definitely does have the build to give Robertson a lot of trouble. So I think that if Maverick is able to stuff the takedowns and keep the fight standing, I think she should be able to win the decision there. But I'm not entirely convinced with her takedown defense just yet. She's still a little unproven. So as far as a pick goes, I am going to have to go with Maverick here. She is still very green, but I think her strength and athleticism might be able to carry her through this fight, similar to how the Barber fight went. I'm not sure if Maverick has as much power as Barber, but from what we've seen, she was doing quite a bit of damage on Joshua, and I'm not convinced with Robertson striking at all. So if on the feet, I do favor Maverick here, and again, the pick is Maverick, but don't think I'm going to put any money on her yet. And in the next matchup, we have Gabe Green, who is the -137 favorite against Philip Rowe, the +117 underdog. And this should be a fun one, especially since Gabe, really likes to move forward and pressure opponents. As we saw in his Daniel, Rodriguez fight and Richard Leroy fight, Gabe was able to move forward, pressure opponents. He loves to swing big shots and, have really no regard for defense at all. He's happy to take one to give one, or even take two to give one for that matter, but that's just the kind of fighter he is. He's really aggressive. He really loads up on his shots too, whether it's a kick or a punch. He's looking to do some serious damage. He made his UFC debut against Rodriguez in his last fight. This was in May of 2020. And he actually gave a pretty good account of himself. Was a bit sloppy in that fight, lots of back and forth. Did take a lot of damage, but was able to get through all 3 rounds. But Rodriguez was just able to land way more on Green than Green was on him. And in his matchup before that, it was against Richard Leroy, where the fight kind of played out similarly in the sense that both guys were just swinging and going back and forth. But the only difference was he was able to get the finish late in the second round there. And before that, Green did show off his submission skills. He did backpack Garcia for most of the second round, was able to take him down in the third round before finally getting the submission. So Green definitely does have some solid jiu-jitsu, but it seems like he's more than happy to stand and bang with opponents. And on the other side, we have Philip Rowe, who's coming off of a Contender Series win back in 2019 against Leon Shabazian, the not as talented older brother of Edmund Shabazian. And in that fight, he had really low output and looked like he might have gotten rocked a bit in that first round, but was able to recover. He did kind of struggle a bit with the takedown early in the second, but was able to reverse Shabazian. I think Shabazian got a little sloppy there, but in his other fight against Mikian, it looks like Rowe does struggle a bit with the wrestling. So when he finds himself on the back, I think that's where he struggles the most. As far as his stand-up goes, though, he's a very lanky guy, has tremendous reach. He has a 80.5-inch reach compared to Green's 73-inch reach. He's got a great jab, 1-2, and straight right, but the only issue is Rowe doesn't really throw that much, and a lot of the time he's just backing down or circling out looking for that perfect shot. Like in his fight against Shabazian, I believe he was outstruck 14 to 30-something in that fight, and then was able to reverse in the second round after getting taken down. Landed some serious ground and pound on Shabazian, and probably had him rocked going into the third round before knocking him out early in the third. So it's worked out for him before, but I feel like he's gotten a little lucky, and I don't know how often or how many times he can keep pulling it off. And in the fight before that against Matt Mikian, it was playing out pretty similarly. Really low output fight, but he was able to get a standing guillotine, drag Matt Mikian to the ground, and eventually get the submission that way. But before that, he's been fighting absolute cans and just really low-level guys. If you kind of just flip through the record of Philip Rowe before Matt Mikian, he's fought a guy who's 1-2, 0-3, 0-1, 1-1. So he's fought some really low-level guys, and his record is a bit padded, whereas with Green, I feel like he's fought some decent competition. Going into before his UFC debut, he did go up against Leroy, who's 7-0, Garcia, who's 3-0, and Chris Padilla, who's 9-2, and Castillo, who's 14-7. So I mean, these guys aren't the best, but at least they have some professional experience. Whereas guys the guys that Philip has gone against or Rowe has gone against is just pretty low level and honestly really green to the game. So as far as a pick goes, I am going to have to lean towards Green. I feel like his volume is going to be a bit of an issue for Rowe, who's, he does have some power, but he just really doesn't throw. And if he doesn't land that shot on Green, then he's very likely going to lose on the scorecards. And I wouldn't say that Rowe is chinny at this point, but I definitely do think his chin might be a little bit suspect, especially in that Shabazian fight early where he got rocked against Shabazian. And someone like Green, I think, would definitely find the mark, and if he does, he might be able to get Rowe out of there. I'm really tempted to take a shot on Green, but my only concern is Green is really hittable, and against someone like Rowe, even though he doesn't have a ton of volume, if he leaves his chin out there like that against, as we've seen, against Leroy and Rodriguez, he could get caught and he could get knocked out against Rowe, who definitely has some power in his hands. And Gabe has some losses on his record as well, so he might be a little bit chinny on his end too. And if I don't end up pulling the trigger on Green, I might actually just take the under 2.5, which is minus 120 at the moment. I feel that Green definitely is gonna bring the pressure. He's gonna go hard at Rowe early, and if he can clip Rowe, I definitely think he can get him out of there. But if he doesn't, then I think 2.5 rounds is plenty of time for Rowe to really find the mark on Green. Uh, so yeah, I really like the under 2.5, or either just playing Green straight. The only thing that's holding me back really is again the durability of Green, potentially his lack of defense, and the fact that this is really a low level fight. But I'm really just not sold on Rowe at all. I don't like his fighting style. He's got a lot of power, but I really don't like guys who just look for that that low volume KO shot. So as far as a pick goes, I am going to have to go with Green here. But right now, I don't have anything locked in yet. I'm really heavily considering the under, and possibly in the next matchup we have Ricky Simón, the minus 241 favorite, against Brian Kelleher, the plus 206 underdog. And I believe they were actually scheduled to fight on the Holloway Cater card earlier in this year. But the fight fell through because Kelleher tested positive, and Simón ended up being matched up with Pirello, who he made pretty easy work of. And then now is making a pretty quick turnaround against Kelleher, about 3 weeks. And, he didn't take a lot of damage in that fight, so I can see why he wants to make that quick turnaround. The only issue, or the only thing I'm really concerned about, is potentially the weight cut. He'll be cutting weight twice in about 3 weeks. So that's, I don't know if it's going to affect his gas tank at all, but I definitely feel like it should be something that is considered, considering that Simón is a pretty heavy favorite in this fight. As far as what he does well, though, I really do like the boxing that Simón brings. He prefers to box in the pocket, but I think he just does that so he can set up his takedowns a little better. He has good defensive boxing, nice tight high guard, and good head movement. And he has a pretty crazy reach, too, for his size. Let's take a look at it here real quick. He is got a 70-inch reach. He's 5'6", whereas, Kelleher, he's got a 64-inch reach. So he's got a solid 6-inch reach on Kelleher here. But really, the bread and butter of his, fight style is really just his grappling. He has great chain wrestling. I mean, he averages 7 takedowns per fight, and he's really just good at keeping pressure on opponents with his wrestling. But with that being said, though, Simón really is comfortable on his feet as well. So I don't think that he'll be completely outmatched on the feet, because in terms of striking, I think Kelleher really just relies on his power. I feel that Simón actually has a bit more layered boxing, but whereas Kelleher, he's really just winging hooks most of the time. Kelleher is a veteran of the sport, but it seems he has gotten pretty reliant on his power. I mean, he has a dangerous lead and check hook, but outside of that, I don't think he offers too much. He also does actually have a pretty dangerous guillotine, but I'm not too sure if he's able to pull that off against Simón here, as a lot of the guys that he's beaten with that are relatively low-level guys in Osborne and Ray Rodriguez. So take that how you will. As far as how the fight is going to play out, I do favor Simón in this matchup. I do like his striking a bit more. I think he's probably the more fluid striker, but I think the real advantage is going to come with the grappling, and I see this playing out somewhat similarly to the Kelleher-Stamann fight, where Stamann was able to just out-grapple Kelleher and just kind of grind him out. But yeah, I think that this is a pretty safe fight for Simón. The only real danger is the knockout threat, and that definitely is something to be concerned about, because that he did lose to Uriah Faber a bit over a year ago, and he did get knocked out in that fight against I believe a 40-year-old Faber, and really hard to shake that feeling for Simón here, especially against Kelleher, who does have some really knockout power. But I feel that that's a pretty narrow path to victory for Kelleher there. I think more than likely Simón will be able to take Kelleher down and most likely just grind him out for 3 rounds. The only concern I really have is the consecutive weight cuts for Simón. I actually really liked the Simón play back when he was matched up against Kelleher for the Cater Holloway card. He was actually, I think, a minus 200 favorite at the time, and I was ready to play him straight. But With this consecutive weight cut, I am a little concerned that it might actually have a negative impact on it. And now the line has gotten steamed a little bit more. So I think it's a good idea to maybe wait for the weigh-ins to see what shape he's in. If it doesn't look too bad, I might end up putting him in a parlay if I find another fighter that I like on this card. But more than likely, I'm going to be avoiding this fight from a betting perspective. But as far as a pick goes, I am going to have to go with Simone here, and no bet at the moment. And in the next fight, we have Polyana Viana, the plus 131 underdog against Mallory Martin, the minus 151 favorite. And let's start with Viana here. Honestly, I'm not too impressed with her UFC stint so far. She was on a 3-fight losing streak to pretty low-level fighters like J.J. Aldrich, Hannah Cifers, and Veronica Macedo before finally getting a win against Emily Whitmire, who I feel isn't really UFC caliber at all. She did get a pretty solid armbar victory there, and that's really just her game. Viana's striking isn't terrible. It's passable, but really where she shines is in the BJJ. But with that being said, though, as good as her BJJ is, it doesn't seem like she really sells out for the takedown or anything. She's more than happy to stand and trade on the feet. You would think that someone who's a BJJ world champ would try and sell out for the takedown and just try and get the fight to the ground where she could really get her BJJ rolling there. It seems that a lot of her takedowns are just pretty opportunistic. A lot of the times it's her opponent that's either taking her down and she's able to reverse and sweep. She doesn't really actively look for the takedown, it seems. And a lot of the time, it does look like when she is taken down, she's more than happy to play in her guard and stay on her back to really hunt the submission. And I don't think that'll be a really good idea against Martin, who really likes to wrestle and control her opponents on the ground. If she isn't able to get the submission in those situations, then she very likely will lose the decision there. So if I'm Viana, I would actually try and keep the fight standing, because I do think that Viana will have the advantage on the feet. I think that she's a little bit quicker. Her striking is a little bit more crisp, and I think she does have the size advantage, right? Let's take a look here. Right, so she does have a 3-inch reach advantage over Martin and a 1-inch height advantage. So on the feet, I think Viana should be able to pull ahead, but the concern really here is just being taken down and controlled on the ground. But taking a look at Martin, like I said before, I think Martin is not as good of a striker. She's very basic with her striking. Where she really shines, though, is in her grappling. She likes to take opponents down, control them, and lay the ground and pound. She does have a loss against Virna Jandiroba via rear naked choke, and I don't think it's too bad of a loss there, since Jandiroba is a very high-level jiu-jitsu player. And, if you want to look on the bright side, she did survive a round against Jandiroba. And, she did look good in certain spots. She ended up just getting her back taken and then choked out that way. So I feel that if Martin is able to maintain top position, she may be able to fend off the potential armbar submission from Viana. So with all of that being said, I am really tempted to actually take a shot on Martin here. The only thing that's keeping me away is that this is a pretty low-level women's MMA fight. And, actually out of all three of the women's fight on this card, I think this one might be the one with like the least variance. Just because I feel like there's fewer unknowns. I think the primary path to victory for Viana is really just getting that submission. And she definitely is live for that, but more likely than not, I think Martin is going to be able to control Viana on the ground, avoid the submission, and really just win through control time and landing that ground and pound. And for someone who is supposedly a BJJ world champ, I haven't been too impressed with Viana's submission skills. Like, yeah, sure, she does have a really nice submission actually against Whitmire, the way she set up that armbar, but Whitmire is very low level, and seeing Hannah Cifers lay on top of Viana for a bit and laying and doing damage to her, she didn't look too great there, and she wasn't able to get the submission there. She wasn't able to get the submission against Aldrich. So I feel like against competition or against fighters who are decent BJJ practitioners that, she'll struggle getting that submission. And she also does have an armbar loss to Veronica Macedo, which was not a good look either. So For as good as her BJJ is supposedly, I'm not really sold on it for Viana. So the pick here is going to be Mallory Martin, but I don't have a bet locked in just yet. I might later. I'm heavily considering it. I know people say not to bet on women's MMA fights, but I really do feel confident about Mallory Martin just being avoiding the submission and being able to grind out a decision here. However, no bet at the time of recording this yet. If I do lock anything in, I'll be sure to post it on my Bet MMA and tips in the page. Next fight, we have Belal Muhammad, the minus 405 favorite against Dhiego Lima, the plus 335 underdog. And this is a pretty straightforward fight to break down, in my opinion. Let's start with Dhiego Lima, who I feel is barely UFC level at this point. He's primarily a counter striker, and that leads to him having really low output. A lot of the time he's being pressured. He's the one backing up, circling out, looking for that perfect shot. And sometimes it works, but most of the time it'll lead to a really close decision or straight up loss on the scorecards. And he's just a really boring fighter to watch. And that just comes with the style. If he's not getting the knockout, he's going to be backing up most of the time, not really throwing much. But as far as Belal Muhammad goes, he's very well rounded. I really like what he has to offer on the feet. Really on the ground. His wrestling, his BJJ, really really solid. I think all around he's going to be the much better fighter than Lima. I think he's going to be the better fighter wherever it takes place. Whether it's standing or on the ground. So overall, I really do favor Muhammad in this matchup. I think it should be a pretty comfortable decision win for him. With that being said, though, I do think that there are a couple concerns that I have for this fight, and obviously that's going to be the knockout ability of Lima. As much as I don't like how he fights, that is part of his game, and that is something that he's looking for. So that's definitely on the table there, but I don't think it'll be too likely. Muhammad did get knocked out by Luque and Neal. Those guys are vicious strikers, so I can't look into that too much, but he's definitely been chin checked and he's definitely been hurt, so that is on the table. Don't want to overlook that. However, I do feel that Muhammad is on a different level in terms of striking than Lima here. I think he'll be able to mix up the looks enough to not let Lima get into a rhythm, be able to time him and eventually find that knockout. So I don't think it's too likely he will get the knockout, but it is a possibility. And the other concern I do have for this fight is that Muhammad is a decisionator at this point, and that could be a little worrisome, especially if it gets to the card. You don't know what some of these judges are seeing. Like last week with Dariush, it was somehow a split decision. It could get a little dicey with Muhammad since he does go to a decision a lot. And, the concern really with the decision is that when you're fighting a counterpuncher like Lima, they tend to slow down the pace quite a bit, right? Because a lot of fighters, or at least a lot of smart fighters, they're not going to engage as much because they don't want to get hit. So a lot of the time when you're fighting a counterpuncher, the output lowers quite a bit. And when that happens, Lima could potentially steal a decision. I don't think that's too likely either since Muhammad does have the wrestling to go to, but definitely a concern for this fight. But with that being said, though, I just think that Muhammad is better everywhere, and he should be able to coast to a decision here. So as far as a pick goes, I'm definitely going to have to go with Muhammad here. And as far as betting tips go, I might actually parlay Muhammad. I might parlay him with Vieira. The odds for that will likely come out to around like minus 190 or so, but I think it's a pretty safe bet. I think both of these guys should be able to coast to a win here. I do have a couple plays on underdogs, so I definitely want to put something in there that's a little safer to, in case those dogs don't pan out. But as far as the pick goes, I got Muhammad here, and most likely we'll be parlaying him up with Vieira. And in the next matchup, we have Rodolfo Vieira, the minus 400 favorite against Anthony Hernandez, the plus 300 underdog. And let's start with Vieira here. I think this will be a pretty straightforward breakdown. Vieira is an elite BJJ practitioner. He's 5-0 in his last 5, and this will be his third fight in the UFC. He's got wins over Piota and Safarov in the UFC. Two, I'd say, pretty low-level guys, but he looked amazing in it. He was able to get both guys down, was able to just outmuscle them, and then eventually get the submission. And if you haven't already, I recommend checking out that Safarov fight, which was honestly pretty nutty. He had a pretty crazy size advantage on Safarov, and they say Safarov is 34 years old, but that guy looks like he's 44. And man, the size advantage was just absolutely insane. Vieira looked like an absolute Adonis in there going up against a homeless Russian dude. But, Safarov was actually able to clip him early. Looked like he might have rocked him a little bit, but Vieira was able to get like a double leg on him, take him down, and just really just outmuscle him and eventually get the arm triangle choke. I haven't seen too much from Vieira on the feet since most of his fights he'll just look to shoot for the takedown as soon as he can. But as far as what he does on his feet, he's not terrible. He's more concerned with not taking too much damage, maybe throwing a jab or two before eventually shooting for the takedown. But yeah, once he gets the fight to the ground, I'm pretty sure that he'll be able to get the submission on Hernandez if he wanted to. And as far as what Hernandez does well and what he brings to the table, I really like his boxing. He's got really crisp boxing, really good head movement, and when he starts the fight, I think he is when he's most confident. He's slipping and ripping, but once he starts taking a bit of damage, though, he gets a little sloppy, and I think he starts to panic a bit, right? So before that, when the fight starts, he's landing on his opponent, but as soon as he takes damage, he just kind of becomes a totally different fighter. I don't think it'll matter too much though, because I think that Vieira should be able to just outmuscle Hernandez here and just take him to the ground and eventually get the submission. Going into this fight, I think Hernandez is just going to be giving up way too much strength and size here. Like, their measurables are pretty similar in the sense that they're both 6 feet tall. Hernandez has a 75-inch reach and Vieira has a 73-inch reach, but Vieira is just gonna have way more muscle on him. He's gonna be way more cut, whereas Hernandez, he's gonna be a lot. He's not in terrible shape, but he's gonna be a lot softer looking compared to Vieira. So as far as how the fight is gonna play out, I think that Vieira may, kind of dance around on the feet a little bit, maybe throw out a jab or two, and really just kind of get a few shots in and kind of set up the takedown. Because at the end of the day, I think that Vieira really is just going to want to take Hernandez down and submit him. And I don't see too much resistance coming from Hernandez's end. The only concern that I do have for Vieira is he did get clipped by Safarov in his fight there. And Hernandez does have quick hands, so if he is able to time that entry well, maybe he could land like an uppercut or something. But I don't think that's too likely. I think more often than not, or more likely than not, Vieira is going to get the takedown and the submission. So the pick here is going to be Vieira, but the line is a little wider than I'd like. I might put him in a parlay, but as of right now, I don't think I'm going to make a play on Vieira just yet. The line is a little wide for my liking, especially since he has shown that he might potentially be a little chinny. So no bet just yet. And in the next fight, we have Maki Pitolo, the plus 140 underdog, against Julian Marquez, the minus 160 favorite. And this is going to be a pretty fun fight. I think we have two guys who really like to move forward and bang, really. So it should be a pretty exciting fight. And let's start with Maki Pitolo. I actually do really like Maki Pitolo. He has a really fun fight style, but the issue with him is he just hasn't really been able to deliver in the UFC, right? So he made his he won his Contender Series debut against Justin Sumter, was able to get the finish there. Then he came in as a pretty heavy favorite against Callan Potter in his UFC debut, where he lost that because Potter was able to consistently take him down and just grind him out in that fight. And then his only win was his only win in the UFC was against Charles Byrd, who retired after that fight before he dropped a couple fights against Darren Stewart, where he got choked out by Darren Stewart, who doesn't choke anyone out, and then loses to Impa Kasanganay. And, I feel was a pretty competitive fight. Kasanganay is a pretty decent prospect, but I felt like that definitely should have been a very winnable fight for Pitolo. I just think that after that first round, he never really was able to get into a rhythm, and I think the power of Kasanganay really troubled Pitolo there, and that leads me to one of my first points on Pitolo, and it's that when he starts taking damage, I feel that he gets a little hesitant to throw, right? Like, a lot of the times he'll start out pretty strong, but as soon as he starts taking some damage, he gets a little timid and he gets a little hesitant. He doesn't really sit down on his punches as much. He doesn't really swing as much. He plays it a little safe after taking some damage. But from a striking perspective, I really do like what Pitolo brings to the table. He's got really nice combination striking. He's also got pretty quick hands and loves to work the body as well. I feel that Pitolo has a lot of potential, but he just tends to choke in a lot of these fights. And taking a look at Marquez here, Marquez, he's got crazy power in both hands. He loves to move forward and just swing bombs on his opponents. He's okay with taking a few shots to land his shots since he knows his power is there, and so far his chin has held up. From a technical standpoint though, I do favor Pitolo a bit more. His boxing is much crisper, whereas Marquez tends to be more of a brawler. That being said though, I think the power of Marquez is going to give Pitolo a lot of trouble. Like I said before, I feel that Pitolo doesn't really do well under pressure, and I may be overstating it a bit, but I really do feel that Pitolo doesn't react well to taking damage. Like in his fight against Kasangana, he was doing really well in that first round until he got clipped. Then after that point, he was a bit more timid, didn't throw as much, and didn't seem to put as much power into his shots. And I mean, his output didn't completely go down, but it definitely took a hit there. And then in his fight against Darren Stewart, something similar did happen. I think he felt the power of Stewart, and then he ended up going for the takedown, which really isn't his strong suit, and ended up getting choked out there. Pitolo has also been knocked out twice before, so I think that may have been a factor, or that may be a factor in some of these fights. That being said, though, I don't think he can afford to fight like that. Especially since he is on a 2-fight lose streak, and I don't know how many more opportunities he'll have if he loses this fight. So I actually do think that if Pitolo lets his hands go, really works the body of Marquez, I think he has a good shot at winning this here, but I really just don't know what his mentality is going into this fight. If it's the same Pitolo that showed up against Kasanganay and Stewart, I think Marquez should be able to take it. I think the pressure and the power of Marquez will likely get to Pitolo. My main concern with Marquez, though, is his long layoff. It'll be over 2 years now since his last fight, and the ring rust might be a thing for him. However, this also could potentially be like a Brian Ortega situation where he took a couple years off and has really worked on his striking. He's still pretty young. I was honestly a little surprised to find out that he was only 30. I mean, I was watching some of his fights and I thought he was like 35 or something because he looks so old. But yeah, he's still pretty young, so he's likely, been making improvements. So with all that said, though, I actually think that this fight can play out pretty close, and I definitely do see paths to victory for both guys. Marquez definitely has the power, and I think that he does have an opportunity to knock out Pitolo here, but I think Pitolo is actually the better striker, and if he is able to get out of that first round, is able to avoid taking some serious damage, I think that he could start laying it on Marquez later in the fight in the second and third round. I do think that Marquez has a questionable gas tank, so if Pitolo really goes to the body, which he has shown to do before, I think he could definitely wear on Marquez's gas tank and end up taking the second and third round. But again, it'll really just come down to which Pitolo shows up, right? If he is a bit more urgent, I definitely think that he can win this fight. But as far as a pick goes, I think I'm going to have to go with Pitolo. I think that if he could survive that first round from Marquez, he could definitely start to lay it on in the second and third round. So the pick here is Pitolo, but I don't know if I want to bet him just yet. I don't think that plus 140 is juicy enough odds for me to pick Pitolo at this point. So again, the pick is Pitolo, but no bet at the moment. And in the next matchup, we have Ian Heinisch, the plus 180 underdog, against Kelvin Gastelum, the minus 210 favorite. And let's start with Ian Heinisch here. I really like Ian Heinisch. He's a really well-rounded fighter. I think he's got great striking, great Muay Thai, solid wrestling. Just an all-around good fighter. He's coming off of a knockout win against Meerschaert, and everyone's praising his Muay Thai. But it's Gerald Meerschaert. He's a very middling fighter. He's got a couple losses against Omari Akhmedov and Derek Brunson, who are really solid gatekeepers at this point. And honestly, I feel like Heinisch did give a solid account of himself. He's still pretty well. I feel like he's in his physical prime. He's still making some improvements, but again, he gave a really good account of himself in those fights. And on the other hand, we have Kelvin Gastelum, who I think is a really high level boxer, and we got to see that on full display against Israel Adesanya, where he gave a really good account of himself. But in that fight, Adesanya gave him the fight that he wanted, and that was a stand up fight. I think that Gastelum really struggles against grapplers or anyone who could really mix it up, right? Especially since Gastelum has given up a ton of size in this division. I personally don't feel that Gastelum should be in this division. He shouldn't be fighting at 185. He should be fighting at 170. And honestly, I think he could potentially make 155 if he's really killing himself. But definitely at 170, right? He has the speed advantage at 186, but he's given up a significant size and strength advantage. And we've seen in previous fights, fighters just really abuse that, right? Like Darren Till and Hermanson. Till was able to just hold Gastelum in the clinch, and Hermanson was able to just muscle Gastelum to the ground and go in for the hook, or the heel hook. But Gastelum had really poor fight IQ there too. He decided to go back in on it instead of going back, standing the fight back up. But in any case, I think that this is definitely a winnable fight for Heinisch. Heinisch won't want to have to stand and trade with Gastelum, but I think that if Heinisch comes in with the right game plan, if he's able to use his size to really grind on Gastelum, then he could definitely get the win. Because, like I said before, Gastelum he's way too small for the division here. I think Heinisch will have to use his size and grappling to really smother and neutralize the boxing advantage that Gastelum has. Because I don't think that Heinisch will want to stand and trade with Gastelum for extended periods of time, because he's going to get clipped. He might even get knocked out. He's going to get touched up by Gastelum if he decides to keep this standing. So I definitely think that there is a path to victory for Heinisch here, but he'll have to be smart about it. But as far as a pick goes, it is a little difficult because I do like the boxing of Gastelum. I give him the advantage on the feet here, but he is a little unreliable, and he's giving up a ton of size in this fight. So I think I'm gonna have to go with Heinisch here. I'm gonna trust Heinisch to be smart, to have a solid game plan against Gastelum, to really use his size. I mean, he's gonna be the way bigger fighter, the way stronger fighter. I mean, Gastelum, he's got a belly on him, whereas Heinisch, he's a jacked dude. And yeah, I'm gonna go with Heinisch here. And the lines, the bookies don't have the props out on it yet, but I'm thinking I'm probably gonna put maybe half a unit on Heinisch by decision, because I don't think he'll be able to knock out Gastelum, and I don't think he's got the BJJ chops to submit Gastelum either. So I believe that if he is going to win, it's going to be through a grindy 3-round decision. Again, the line isn't out yet, but at plus 180 for Heinisch to win, I'm guessing it's probably going to be around maybe 220 or so for Heinisch to win by decision, because I really don't see other paths to victory for him. But as soon as the line is out on that, I'm probably going to put half a unit on Heinisch by decision. So to recap, I do think that Heinisch can possibly grind out a win here against Gastelum. I really hope he doesn't decide to stand and strike with Gastelum, because that wouldn't be real smart. So the pick here is Heinisch. Assuming he doesn't stand and bang with them, and I will likely have a half. And in the co-main event, we have Maycee Barber, the plus 117 underdog, versus Alexa Grasso, the minus 137 favorite. So it's kind of crazy that this fight is even in the co-main event. It just goes to show how weak the card is from I guess a popularity standpoint. That this somehow made it to the co-main event. But let's start with Maycee Barber here, right? So, she was a bit of a hype prospect up until that Modafferi fight. You don't see a lot of female fighters just knocking other women out, right? Even though I feel like those knockouts definitely, the stoppages on them were a little early, but that's just how it is with a lot of these women fights or these WMMA fights, and none of the fighters were really contesting it, so I'm not gonna complain about that too much. But up until that Roxanne Modafferi fight, she was just starching chicks left and right. And then in that fight, she was about, I think, a minus 800 favorite. And I actually ended up putting half a unit on Modafferi just because that pricing's a little ridiculous. She's going up against a vet in Modafferi, and there's always the chance that, like, at those odds, that something could happen, and it did. She got injured. I'm not sure if it was, she got taken down and then injured, or if she got injured and then, was taken down, but it is what it is. She was basically just, taken down and kind of just held on the ground for an extended period of time, and, ended up blowing out her ACL. So that's definitely something to consider going into this fight. Barber is coming off of an ACL tear. I'm not sure how big of a factor it is, since Barber never really was like a really, quick or, nimble fighter. I don't know if she really uses her speed that much. She's been just more of like a heavy hitter, in my opinion. But as far as, what she does well on the feet, she packs quite a bit of power, at least for a woman. She's a little slow, a little plodding, but, she's got that power, which is really the greatest equalizer, right? Her striking is a bit rudimentary, and she is a little stiff on the feet, but she does throw a nice 1-2, nice jab, and a nice body, nice leg kick, and it seems like she really does sit down on a lot of her punches and kicks, for that matter. And as far as her cardio goes, it seems decent. She has a pretty solid output, considering she put so much power into her shots. That being said, though, I do think that Alexa Grasso is going to be the better striker here, at least the more technical striker. But what I don't like to see out of Grasso is she is a bit hittable. She does take quite a few shots. She leaves her chin out there, and against someone like Barber, that's not going to be good, because all it'll take is one clean shot to get her knocked out, or at least get her pretty seriously rocked. But this is a pretty tough fight to predict, because I definitely do favor Grasso in the striking department. I think she's going to be the slightly quicker and more technical boxer. But Barber does have that power, that great equalizer, and I think she's got the volume to back it up too. So if it does go the distance, I do think that Barber will give a good account of herself. And we have seen Barber struggle against fighters who will pressure her, like in that J.J. Aldrich fight. Aldrich came out and started, moving forward on Barber, and Barber wasn't doing a really good job, fighting on her back foot. But again, she was able to land clean on Aldrich and kind of turn the tables there. But we can see that, outside of the grappling, obviously, that Barber does have some weaknesses, and if Grasso does, start to move forward, she probably can give Barber some trouble. But again, that power, at least for in the women's division, and the fact that Grasso is hittable, I can't be too confident in picking Grasso here. So I think I'm going to lean towards Maycee Barber. I think that her output is good enough for the decision, and I also feel that she has the knockout upside. The main concern is she's a little slow and a little plodding, and she is coming off that ACL injury, so it might be even worse. Like, she might just get picked apart by Grasso here, but I don't think so. I think that Barber is good at pressing forward, even when she is getting some shots landed on her. So the pick here is going to be Barber, but I don't think I'm going to bet on this. It's a little too high variance of a fight for me. And we are finally here at the main event, Usman versus Burns. So if you guys have been following me on Bet MMA, you know that I already have a unit placed on Burns at plus 230. Right now he sits at plus 235. So the line has definitely moved a little bit in Usman's favor. So right now, Burns is plus 235 underdog. Usman is minus 275. And I definitely do think that Burns has a shot here, but before we, get into that, I just wanted to go over, what Usman does well. And, it's kind of straightforward. Everyone kind of has an idea already. Usman, he's got fucking elite wrestling. He has great cardio and strength. And, he's just so good at neutralizing opponents, holding them up against the cage, just landing those body shots, landing those elbows. And, he gets a lot of hate for the foot stomps and having like a very boring style, but historically he isn't really a foot stomper, and that's just how he fights. He's good at just smothering his opponents, using his wrestling, using his size to kind of just weigh down his opponents, to kind of just smother them. Is it boring? Definitely, but it's definitely effective as well. He's got decent boxing as well, but really his bread and butter is his wrestling, and that's just how he gets it done. And whether or not you like his fighting style, you got to admit that it is pretty effective. And, I got to give him props for being able to just kind of dominate opponents using that same style in every one of his fights. But that about sums up Usman. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, but really effective. So taking a look at Burns, I mean, I feel like he's a really, really well-rounded fighter. He's, elite BJJ. He has a ton of BJJ accolades. He was a world champion and everything. He has great striking and decent wrestling. Obviously not on the level of Usman, but good enough to keep the fight standing. Not that, he really needs to because of, just how good he is on the ground anyways. But from a stand-up perspective, I think that Burns really has, he has quick hands, really solid check hook, 1-2, counter right. He's training under Henry Hooft, who I believe is one of the best, striking coaches in MMA at the moment. So, on the feet, I definitely give Burns an advantage. I feel like he's the quicker fighter. I think he's more explosive, maybe a little more powerful in the sense that, he's got more pop in his shots. I don't think he's stronger than Usman, but I think that in terms of striking, he's maybe the more explosive and powerful fighter there, if that even makes sense. But I don't want to look into the power of Burns too much here, but he did have a knockout on Damian Maia, and he did get a knockdown on Woodley. So I wouldn't say that Burns is a knockout artist just yet, but I definitely do think that he has some power in his hands, especially in this division, right? And while Usman's boxing isn't too bad, he gave a great account of himself against Covington. I just don't think that, with the shots he was taking against Covington, I don't know if he wants to be trading with Burns in a similar fashion. But as far as the BJJ goes, I definitely give Burns the advantage there. He's top level, when it comes to BJJ, and Usman is he's gonna have to be careful against Burns when he's grappling with him, when he's wrestling him, especially when he takes him down. He'll have to be careful, not to leave a limb exposed for Burns to snap up a submission, or he'll also have to be careful not to get swept by Burns because, we know that Usman is really good on top, but if Burns is able to sweep him, we don't know how Usman's going to look with on his back, how he responds to pressure. But he'll have to be careful when he's grappling with Burns. So the safest approach I feel for Usman would be to hold Burns up against the cage like he did to Masvidal, because that negates a lot of the advantages that Burns has. I mean, and Usman, he's definitely got the skill and the power and the cardio to do it for 5 rounds, but that's why I kind of like Burns in this fight, because while Usman can definitely just hold Burns against the cage, he's got to do it for 5 rounds. He's got to be perfect in executing it because he doesn't want to leave any openings for Burns to potentially get the submission or even the knockout. But do I think that Usman can wrestle fuck or even smother Burns for 25 minutes straight? Definitely, because Usman is he's a beast. He's crazy athletic. He's got crazy cardio, and honestly, he's got quite a bit of a size advantage on Burns. Like, once upon a time, Burns was making 155, right? There is no way, there's no scenario in which Usman can ever make 155 without chopping off a limb or something. Like, I feel like he's barely making 185 right now, or 170 as it stands. Like, he could easily move up a division and still be pretty damn dominant there. So Usman, he's got quite a bit of size, strength, and I'd say maybe even a cardio advantage on Burns. But all fights start standing, and I definitely feel that there will be moments in the fight where Burns will have opportunities to strike with Usman and potentially knock him out or give him a lot of trouble or maybe even rock him. And as far as the wrestling goes, if he gets taken down, I definitely think that Burns has the BJJ chops to give Usman a lot of trouble. So in terms of just path to victory, I see a few paths to victory for Burns, either through KO or submission. And for Usman, his path to victory is really just to grind it out for 5 rounds, which he definitely can do, but I feel like there will be openings for Burns to capitalize on. And so I definitely think that he's worth the 1 unit shot on at plus 230, because if you look at some of the fights that Usman has been in before, primarily his last fight against Masvidal, you're getting, I'd say, equal odds. And I hammered those odds for Usman last fight. It was minus 300, but I ended up putting like 6 units on him because I knew that Masvidal wouldn't be as much of a danger. You know, he would have like the flash knockout potential, but I definitely think that Burns is more dangerous on the feet and more dangerous on the ground. So for that reason, you know, I do think that Burns has a shot, at least a better shot than the odds would indicate. But as far as picks go, you know, I do think that there's a good chance that Usman is able to execute that game plan. He's done it before. He's shown that, you know, he could just grind on guys for 5 straight rounds. But as far as, you know, like opponents go, I definitely think that Burns is probably the most dangerous opponent. I'd say outside of, you know, maybe Covington, because I think Covington neutralizes the wrestling of Usman pretty well, and I think he can match his striking. You know, I think he was giving Usman a lot of trouble. I think Usman definitely faked that eye poke to, you know, get a bit of time to recover, but I digress. Anyways, I think I've gone on a little longer than I wanted to for this analysis, so you know, I'll leave it at that. And actually, I did want to bring up one more thing, and that's the old training partners angle, right? I'm not sure if that'll play too big of a factor, but the fact that these guys have trained together, they definitely know some of each other's tendencies. And, you know, I might be reading into this a little too much, but it definitely seems like Burns is the one who's more eager to get into this matchup, whereas Usman, he seems a little more, you know, nonchalant about it. So I don't know if I'm reading it into too much, but I think that, you know, Burns probably is seeing something that he can exploit. So I feel like it's definitely a good sign there. But that being said, I'm going to pick Usman here, but I do have a 1-unit bet placed on Burns. And that is another one in the books. Just to recap some of my bets, I do currently have 1 unit on Burns at plus 230, 1.3 units on the under, 2.5 for Green versus Rowe at minus 130, 0.5 units on Heinisch by decision at plus 350, and 3.6 units on a Muhammad and Vieira parlay at minus 180. I do have some other leans that I may lock in later, but if I do, I will be sure to post those on Bet MMA. And honestly, I'm not super confident on Burns and Heinisch since they are technically fighting better opponents. I very well could be throwing away 1.5 units here, but I think it's a pretty solid value pick on both ends, and I'm pretty confident in some of my other picks. So, you know, I really hope I don't have another losing week, but if I do, it is what it is. Anyways, thank you guys for listening. I'll catch you guys next time.